Hello and welcome to IronAge Media. Today we'll be talking to Razörfist and George Alexopoulos about The Ghost of the Badlands, a Western graphic novel that is currently crowdfunding on Indiegogo. With almost 3,000 backers and approaching $200,000 in support, the campaign has already smashed its original goals. I'll be talking to Razör about his inspirations and thoughts as the author behind the novel, as well as the artistic plans and goals that George has with this project. If you're curious about it and you haven't picked it up yet, links will be in the description, and I encourage you to check those out after giving this a listen. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
I'm ready.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us, or joining me today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about The Ghost of the Badlands. First of all, congratulations on your incredible success with your campaign. Did you guys, I know you guys didn't quite expect it to be this successful, but, is this beyond your wildest expectations, or how are you feeling right now?
I won't speak for him, but for me, I guess I sort of underestimated two things. I mean, yes, we all know about like the success of like ISOM and whatever, and I think people are hungry for non-big two comic book projects that are not necessarily conservative, but non-ideological, that aren't attempting to preach or propagandize or proselytize. Like,
yeah.
Kind of that appeals right now, that has an innate appeal, and it's clearly a gap in the market that a few savvy individuals have sought to fill. So I think that's the first one. And the second one that I underestimated was we kind of got in on the ground floor of this Western resurgence. I think that's the other aspect and it's not even quite here yet. That's what amazes me, it's a lot of the Western stuff has been greenlit. It's going to come out like later in the year. 2024 is going to be like the year of the Western. Hollywood's already greenlit. There's like a Scorsese film coming out, right? Like, so I'm as amazed as I am at how well the sort of pre-order has gone. I'm kind of more interested to see what happens when it actually launches.
Yeah.
Because that's when all the Westerns will be hitting the market. But yeah, I think I underestimated those two things.
Yeah, I was watching on Friday Night Tights, and it was just up, man. Yeah, it was very, very cool.
And since then, we've almost doubled what we made on Friday Night Tights.
Yes. Yeah, huge accomplishment.
A little more than that, actually.
Yeah. So, you guys have a bunch of new stretch goals now, including I guess it was always in the cards to have George fly out to Arizona and take a look around. But, what all are you guys planning on doing on that trip? And, what's on the docket?
Whatever he wants to do. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of cool Old Westy places. I would expect you to go to Tombstone. Mm-hmm. Tombstone is basically preserved in time. It literally is an Old West town. It's amazing. Seeing Canyon Diablo, what's left of it, is important because you got to see that bridge. You got to see the desolation. You got to see, that whole area. Two Guns and Canyon Diablo, which are like within a few miles of each other. It's just an amazing kind of little area there. So yeah, we'll probably hit up, the shooting range, do something, something like that. And, he's basically doing research.
Yeah, you know what? As we say stretch goals, I'm going to get something real quick. Keep going one more second.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'll answer that question.
But I mean, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. There's a lot of cool places though that we could hit up. Like Prescott is kind of Old Westy.
Yeah.
Jerome is very Old West. There's a ton of that kind of. You don't see it much anymore with the like more Californicated parts of Arizona, but like there's some pockets where they're sort of preserved in time a little bit. It's cool.
Yeah, I have some in-laws out in Prescott, and I've had a good time going out there. It's very, very beautiful, very cool place.
Yeah, Whiskey Row. They got Whiskey Row,
yeah,
which is as Old West as you get, and I mean, my God, Wyatt Earp stopped through there. Doc Holliday. That Prescott used to be the capital of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool. There's just a lot of neat history, and I'm looking forward to him getting to experience it. Of course, a lot of it I imagine he's going to do without me, the cheating bastard. But,
Well, he's got a
I
little bit
can-
more catching up to do on Arizona, I suppose.
yeah.
I mean, I can spend as much time as is necessary. And of course, when I go there, like there's budgetary questions of like, I don't want to take, not to talk about contract stuff or our personal deal, but I don't want Razor to pay for my trip at all. So I don't want to spend too much of my money anyways, because I want to be smart about how we spend every penny and that sort of thing. But
I would recommend don't do the touristy stuff. We'll just
No.
like, why don't you just swing through, hit up various places, chill, take some sketches,
Yeah.
take some photos, reference photos, I imagine, that kind of thing. Kind of be there in the place, maybe take some video, so
Yeah.
you can sort of remember what it was like. That's kind of what I would do anyway. And save the money, spend all the money on our outrageously inflated gas prices.
Well, part of the plan, at least in every artist has their own style of doing things. But what I would do is I seem to remember things by touching, not to like joke about like grab boobs and stuff like that. But no, honestly, like when I go there, I plan to take my shoes off and like touch the ground and like go to buildings and like feel things. And I want to like sort of just experience it with all five senses. So as many things as possible, I want to physically be there. And not just take reference photos, but I want to take reference drawings. I want to actually be out there in the sun and get exhausted and feel what that feels like. Just sort of when somebody pays for a comic, like especially ours, it's a small indie project, so our books are a little more expensive because we're not printing as many books as other, big companies. If you're paying extra, I want you to get every penny's worth. So I would want to read a book from an artist who's really experienced as much as of that stuff as possible. And I was at an antique shop recently. I wanted to show this off because you mentioned stretch goals. So there's these old newspapers. I don't know if it shows up well.
Yeah.
So these books are incredible, and they're
Can you
from
hold that a little
18.
bit more centered, if you don't mind? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
There
you see that?
There we go. Yeah.
it's from 1894. Actually, it's from New York,
Nice.
unfortunately. But I was at the antique shop, just trying to get inspiration and stuff, and I found these newspapers like this. Like they would put illustrations with tons of text, and I thought as a stretch goal, instead of my silly joke 500K stretch goal of George's big cowboy adventure, that was just a placeholder. But that could be funny too. I think we should do an extra newspaper as if it was from that period.
Ooh.
And so that's going to be extra work, but it doesn't cost too much to print, for example. And I think it would feel really cool. We could put all the maps that we draw in it, political cartoons of that time that are, fake, but and articles about someone spotted the ghost recently, stuff like that. So that's extra work for Razor, but I think, and I'll help out, of course, but that would be such a cool stretch goal.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Kind of written in the style of like when you read newspapers in Red Dead Redemption 2 or something like
Yeah,
that.
we even have,
I like that a lot.
I have those ads, the real ads, if you want to see. There was one I bookmarked just now.
Well, some of the old ads are have so much personality on.
They have one that I thought
it's crazy.
They've got one that just says "free bones." I'm like, what? I gotta find it. And what it really meant was it's because it's a fashion magazine, I guess, and you could put bones in like clothing.
Yeah, in a corset.
Okay.
I'll have to post it later.
I forget what the bone is, like whale bone or something like that.
Yeah, it said not whale bones like those other competitors of ours. We have falcon bones. I'm like, oh, okay. But that's like the authentic stuff that like Red Dead did do that when you would flip through the pages at the shop. But it's like, oh, I have the real thing in my hands right now. So
that's great.
Yeah, I'll try to find aged paper and stuff too.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Totally.
Yeah,
man, I'm just excited to see what you guys do with this. So, getting a little bit back more into the weeds on the graphic novel itself. I know, Razor, I know that you did the top 10 inspirations for that as a separate video. George, for you, what inspirations did you draw from artistically? I know that a lot of this still contains like your style that that we've come to recognize, but what kind of particular sources did you look at and draw inspiration from?
I actually drew a lot on old woodcut prints. I don't remember what they're exactly called. Etchings like Gustave Doré from back in the day. Like before photography became very popular in these newspapers, especially I have my old Harper's here. I did a bunch of research on, was it Harper's? Like old Civil War newspapers that they were releasing way back in the day, like 1850s. And it was all illustrated so beautifully, and they were etchings. So I'm using techniques, even though I'm using modern techniques. I'm telling myself I'm not going to use any tricks that they wouldn't have done, except I'm using the speed of modern. Like, so I'll put down black slashes and then use a white brush on top of it to erase the slashes so it looks like a gradient.
Ah, okay.
So I'll use those techniques, and also I'm a huge manga guy, and they use a lot of those techniques still today. So my favorite manga is it's called Vagabond, and there's also
Which is fascinating because when we so I gave him like a style guide at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, like the visual whatever clothing looks like this. Maybe look at this movie. Maybe look at this comic. Blah blah blah. And one of them was Vagabond. We were both pulling from the same thing. Samurai. I mean, because look, samurais and westerns have always cohabitated. So it was going to be we both kind of instinctually just knew it was going to be black and white. So I don't even know if we had a conversation about it. But Vagabond, manga is still in black and white, and a lot of ED is in black and white as well. So we're kind of pulling from, it's kind of an east-west thing.
Yeah. And when we colorize, we also were talking about like we want it to look aged and sepia almost. So, even though a lot of people like comment on my colors and my political strips and stuff, I think I'm going to use muted colors this time.
Yeah.
And maybe selectively do splash like big flashy colors, but very sparingly for effect. I think if we age the book artificially, it'll look authentic and modern at the same time, and classical. So there's this weird experimentation that has to happen. Like there's something called color holds in comics. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
No, not particularly.
It's when you take say you have an inked page and something in the foreground is all black ink, but something in the background looks faded. You would take the black ink from like a mountain or a tree in the distance and turn the black into like a dark green or a dark sepia. So I'm going to ink normally, but then I'm going to actually kind of mute the ink so that it looks more distant. That's not something they would do in manga, and it's a lot of extra work, but people funded the project based on we're going to colorize the deluxe edition. So I want to give them a little extra value. It'll be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to both.
There's a little preview of it in the trailer. A little one panel that has some of the experiments he's been doing with color on it. Just one little panel. So you get a little sneak if you check out the trailer.
All right. I'll definitely link that below in the description so that everybody can check that out.
Yeah, it was a test though, so it's a little too it's out of gamma. It's too bright and saturated. We're going to desaturate those colors and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I expect the final product to be tweaked a little bit. That's just the nature of these things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's fantastic. Now, with the Ghost himself, is there anything else that you want to talk about, go into detail about, Razor, with what this character is going to be like, or is this going to be all are you going to tease these things out later? Or is this just going to be whenever you get the book, you're going to find out?
Oh no, I absolutely can talk about like the approach that we're taking. I mean, the thing that I miss, and one of the reasons I like pulp and older comics and European stuff, is I feel like those still have the mystique to some of the characters. characters. Batman, good lord, like, do I need to know that Batman doesn't go down on Catwoman? Do I need to see the pearl necklace fall in slow motion like 1,000 more times? It's okay to leave things to the imagination. So this is kind of like the way that we're writing this character, and indeed the whole book, is like it's kind of like drawing in chiaroscuro or something like that. It's like I know exactly who this character is and where he's from and what his background is and his motivations, but I want to pull just enough out of the shadows so you can finish the thought, right? I want to give you just enough hints. So we're keeping this character as like the elemental force in the background. We have proxy heroes in the foreground that are more the emotional surrogate. So we follow a guy really on a path of redemption who pays a dire price for his prior wickedness. Former veteran, used to be a good man, and just fell from grace, right? And
who's in the first scene?
Yeah, that's the first scene you see. I was dying, right? This is the guy laying on the ground. He's just gotten the Murphy from RoboCop treatment, and he's just been, shotgun to shit. And then the shadow appears on the horizon. And after laying waste to all these shitbags, he, for whatever reason, extends an olive branch to the man dying on the ground and offers him a chance at redemption. Because in the same way as and I was inspired obviously by the Doc Savages, the Spider, the Shadow, of course. They have a cast of people, because you can't, back in the day it was considered implausible that like one guy could just fight crime by themselves. So like they often had their own kind of retinue of people, and so the Shadow had his agents, and Doc Savage had his group of guys, obviously, and the Ghost, with his kind of Old Testament sort of bent, is ultimately on a mission. These are missionaries. So this is sort of what he's offering, and so we get to see the Ghost through the eyes of a normal person who's discovering him for the first time. So yeah, I want to stress the character's not like a cock tease in a mask. You're going to learn things about him, but the way that it's written is, I adhere to the Walter Gibson quote of when he was describing how he came up with the Shadow. And he said, make sure that your character is beyond you and somewhat unknowable, so that no matter what you uncover, you can't uncover all, right? And that to me is kind of, we'll tell you things about the character, but we're also gonna ask like 10 questions at the same time to keep the interest going, and because that's just a better story, to be honest. But yeah, the emotional surrogates are more so the other characters, and there's a whole cast of them that we've come up with. But yeah, the main one is this main character who's sort of redeeming himself over the course of the story.
One of the cool things about the script that you gave me is characters are telling stories they've heard about him, but nobody really knows the truth. So there might be scenes where I'll illustrate what the guy thinks he heard, but maybe that's not what really happened. And even I don't know the true story. And that's the best. That's probably for the best, because I'll draw it in such a way that maybe I think it happened, but not really. So it only adds to the mystique, probably.
That's right. It's inspired by there's a Doc Savage book where this happens, where they're kind of describing what they think Doc Savage is, and it's all this exaggerated whatever.
Yeah.
In the first Shadow book, The Living Shadow, there's this great moment where this thug is talking to another thug, and the sort of surrogate character is overhearing them, and he's like, I heard about this aviator in World War I who crashed in France, and his whole face got massacred, and that I thought I saw a bandage on his face, right? Like, you're getting these and none of that turned out to be true. I mean, some of it a little bit, but none of that turned out to be true. But it's more important that you ask the question and let the reader finish the thought, decide, is that credible? It's a thug. Is that like real? Is it? So we get some moments like that with the Ghost, because it's way more interesting to read.
Well, that's awesome. And you already answered a couple of questions that I had in terms of follow-up, which is, about the expanded cast of these I guess, emotional surrogates or whatever you want to call them. But will this novel primarily follow the man that you see at the very first scene?
Well, I can tell you I have the second one outlined.
Okay.
And it more so follows another character, although that character is also in it, right? So it's going to be handled more in a way of what fits the plot. So the way that I was thinking about it is kind of similar to the Shadows Agents, or also Doc Savage's guys, where one guy's kind of more of a sciencey dude, one guy's more of a thug, you know. So if the story deals with one thing or another, then that character slides into that role really perfectly. And so the story's probably going to have a little more to do with them, right? If you're telling a story about nuclear weapons or something, then the sciencey guy would probably be front and center. But you keep, by doing this, you keep the sort of the titular character more remote, but also more imposing and impressive. And you also turn them into a vehicle of plot, because you only have to drop that character in when it's time to really move the plot forward, like in a big way. So they're characters of action. You keep them for being a redundancy in their own book. Whereas, again, I have to use the Batman example, but how many times have we seen these lame scenes where he's taking his tights off and he's in his bat cave and all the mundanity? You know what I mean? Like, I do not want to see that with this character. And this is sort of the anti-modern Batman. Old school Batman was a little different, but
yeah, I was thinking of, as you were describing this, I kept thinking of different shadow pulps that I've read or listened to, and
it's very much that, and the Spider and all those kind of characters from that generation.
So, are you now on Night Vale? You've talked about having kind of a set of, what would you call it? Not necessarily plots, but kind of like genres and plots combined, these sort of archetypal stories that will go through. Are you going to be doing something that you eventually kind of run through and then cycle back to? Do you have those kinds of plans for Ghost of the Badlands, or is this going to be kind of more of a limited?
I mean, the sky's the limit with this. That's the interesting thing with the premise that I just described. I mean, think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds that way.
You could just brainstorm any Western Victorian Edwardian age tale and pick a character from one walk of life, and that person is recruited as or baptized into as a missionary of the ghost, right? And you could follow their story. It could be anyone from a freed slave to a banker, to a politician, to a military man, to a society person, to a Chinese railroad worker. You know what I mean? Like, it could be anybody. And the cast I expect to expand. In fact, I know it's going to, because in the second book, which I have outlined, it does expand. So it's definitely like it's gonna. I don't feel like it needs to be formulaic. When I have a story to tell, I'm gonna tell it for sure. But I don't think I'm gonna have to rotate as much. Also, lower page count on comics is a boon in that regard.
Yeah, that's very true.
Even a novella feels more involved than just a graphic novel. Graphic novels fly by.
Yeah, very much so. So one of the things I've been curious about is, do you guys have like a very specific, because it seems like there's been a lot of thought put into the details surrounding the ghost, and overall with this project, you guys have been very detail oriented. Is there a year or a very specific time period that you guys are dialed into, or is it a little bit more ambiguous?
I mean, it was sort of 1890s, nebulous 1890s, but the specific year sort of pinned down in the trailer is 1896.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is we're kind of playing with, it's a real place, right? Canyon Diablo, Arizona is a real place.
Yeah.
But there's, like a lot of Old West places, it has kind of its cult of people who are married to the fantasy of what that place was in the Old West. And then it has the people who are dedicated to dismantling it. You see this in Deadwood. You see it in Tombstone, Dodge City. Oh, it didn't happen like that. You hear a lot of that. Canyon Diablo is like that times 10. So There are people who think that Canyon Diablo was just around as long as it took to build the bridge, and then it was gone. And people who have shown like census figures, it only had a population of 30 and things like that, right? So with this, really what we're doing is we're sort of venerating both. I love the real history because I find real history in Old West fiction is way more interesting than the fake stuff. But then also there were a series of pulp stories in the 30s written about Canyon Diablo, and so we're doing that at the same time. So I just made it a nebulous date so that we didn't interfere with one or the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we're enhancing both. I love both. I love the real history and I love the pulp Western stuff.
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry. I guess I should have clarified. I was like, is this does this map to a real time? I guess is what I should have said.
It does, but we're sort of flubbing. We're cheating.
Yeah, okay.
Because according to some of the events in this story, they should have occurred somewhere in the early 1880s. But we're kind of moving it around because we want to have the best of both worlds, right? We're mixing fantasy and reality here. But it is cool, the actual little historical tidbits that we managed to shove in there, because that's the really interesting wrinkles of the location and why I picked it. I also picked it because it's so controversial.
Interesting. All right, well, cool. On the note of the time period, one of the things that I've been excited to see, and I know that you're very passionate about, Razor, is the firearms of the time period. And the Ghost is seen using a Bergman. So, you know, and George talked about making his own Bergman, which was, I was skeptical about his ability to do in a way that would really do him justice. But man, I was going to say, I saw that thing on Friday Night Tights, and I was blown away.
It's dead on.
I know. The guy is a man of many talents, apparently a part-time sculptor as well.
I'll show it off here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's see
so
this thing.
Stupid looking.
I don't think so.
Well, what it is I had to. There's a lot of cracks and stuff.
Right.
But the grip and with my hand, like I'm supposed to draw somebody going like, you know, dodge this.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out the exact angle, and I drew that panel so many times, and it sucked every time. And I was getting so angry because I couldn't get a real model to just hold it and see what it felt like. And I'm like, screw this. Instead of buying a model, I'm just going to make one. And so I retaught myself how to do clay, and it's obviously not very good. There's a wire in here, several wires to hold it together. And then I took a bunch of clay and I slammed it together, and I printed out what a real Bergman looks like and to scale on a piece of paper. And I outlined it. I cut exactly where I thought it needed to go, just for that one stupid panel. And now I'm hanging on to this. Maybe we can auction it off to somebody or something.
Yeah.
Stretch goal.
But yeah, part of the thing for me is, I mean, it's no secret I'm a Yankee from New Jersey, right? I've never been to the Southwest before. I've never really held old guns. I've only shot guns twice in my whole life, and I want to continue. But I don't want to be that guy who just draws things based on movies and video games. In fact, I'm avoiding too much. Like I don't play Red Dead. I haven't played Red Dead too much because I don't want to draw from someone else's experiences and give you guys like a photocopy of a photocopy, and then I'm just like some fake artist. I want to draw things that I've really touched with my own hands and really experienced, because I feel like that would serve the reader better. And so it's important to do these dumb clay models and to go there and touch the soil and stuff like that.
Yeah. And if I had ammo, we could actually fire one because I own one.
Yeah.
But he made it a little bit bigger, which actually was more or less a dictum. This is a Bergman model number 3. We're scaling it more to the slightly larger model number 4, even though it would have to be a 3, I think. But just because it's the hero pistol, you want it to look a little bit bigger,
a little bit more imposing. Yeah,
the Bergman isn't that large actually as a gun. It's pretty small.
Yeah,
my bad.
Yeah,
I will apologize to everybody. Like, I'm still learning. Like, I don't know how to draw horses exactly, but if this matters to anyone, like, I know people who run like equestrian centers and volunteer shelters around my area. So as part of my research, I'm going to go and volunteer at these places, and I want to study and even learn how to ride a horse if I can.
Hmm.
I want to be around them because I don't know how to draw horses yet. I can kind of draw from pictures, but I want to be there. And again, like I got to pet a horse like a week ago, and I'm like, wow, they don't look anything like what I thought they did
Hmm.
in real life. And I'm so embarrassed to say, like, I don't know how to draw these things, but I will throw myself into this research wise because that creates a superior product.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing on the writing front. I not so much this story, but some of the ideas I have for later. I'm doing a lot of research on like native tribes and stuff, which is I've spent a lot of time on the native reservation, and it mainly because I was in metal bands, and freaking, if you know anything about Native Americans, they're freaking gigantic partier metalheads. They're amazing. But it's like I'm reading books upon books upon books about this. That's half of the fun of doing something like this. Like if we knew everything about it, like it wouldn't be much of a challenge to do.
And you know, to our credit, I don't think a lot of Marvel and DC writers even research like Batman when they're working on a Batman book. I'm not even sure they've read Batman. So
Yeah.
we're doing a Western and actually going to these places.
I'm almost certain they don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that in the job description, it's like preferable if you have not. It's like the less familiar you are with the source material, the more easily you can just stamp on whatever propaganda is the flavor of the day.
Not happening
without any compulsion. So, I'm glad to see that. Like, it's very cool to see how excited you guys are about this. I knew that you were, but I think that kind of passion is what shows through and sets apart so many indie creators today from the legacy media, these old franchises that have been bought and sold like they're stocks on the stock market, and then just pumped full of like I said, whatever happens to be the flavor of the day. Whenever you are going back to these sources and things like that, is there, are there any topics that you're looking in particular beyond just sort of like the flavor that you want to explore, like the politics of the day or the kind of nature of the Old West and any of those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think the central conflict of I'm speaking for me. I hope George answers this as well, actually, because he likes westerns as well. But for me, like I feel like the central Western conflict is, if you were in first year writing class, it would be man versus nature, right? And nature, when you actually take these classes or whatever, which I haven't since freaking junior high, but man versus nature isn't just man versus a cliff face or a waterfall or a cougar. It's man versus society. It can be man versus a city. It can be man versus civilization.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what Westerns are.
Yeah.
You just insert nature, whether nature is, it's really, when you get down to it, it's the individual versus the collective. That's what that's why railroads and trains are this constant recurring theme in Red Dead. In every single Western you see, it's because the railroad is symbolic of statism and the march of progress and the civilization and all of the positives and negatives that brings, right? Mm-hmm. And the great Western stories often involve someone who's resistant to that or is affected in some way by that. And so I think expanding those kind of stories, and you can really expand that to a lot of different strata. You can expand that because that's not just the settlers' experience. That's not just the frontiersman's experience. That's the Navajo's experience, the Hopi's experience. That's the Mexicans' experience to a large degree. Like, you can go a lot of different places with that. It's even escaped and freed slaves' experience around that same time. So I'm looking forward to like correcting a lot of misconceptions about the Old West, which I love. I can't wait till we get into more of the stuff about how law and justice and government actually worked in the Old West a little bit. Not in a preachy way, but just in some way that affects the story.
A matter-of-fact way.
Yeah, there's so many Westerns that just have these conventions that are never questioned. And
Yeah.
even revisionist Westerns, I feel like, get that wrong. I don't know what George wants to do. What do you want to draw? Chicks in pink tutus, or
I'll draw.
Are you going to have a trans sheriff? That's what we need to know.
Yeah.
We need to.
I have drawn all kinds of things during my career. It's just that happens to be what people know me for lately. When I was researching Westerns, before I even knew I was working on this, actually, I mentioned this on Friday, I had been really inspired by Why Westerns Matter, the video that Razor made. And I was like, before I even knew I was doing this project, I was thinking, oh, I want to do a Western too. I'm so inspired by this. So I was trying to think, what would I do, not having experienced it or researched it much, just from movies. I'm very interested in the idea of the encroachment of technology. The Industrial Revolution was happening at the same time as the West was becoming whatever it was. It always seemed to be morphing. Like, you have this idea of, we're going to create the homestead, this sort of second Eden. We're going to create our own country out here. Nobody's going to bother us. And then, of course, industrial stuff caught up with them. But I like the idea that even though technology changes, the human spirit, the human, our flaws never change. So you've got an older generation who wants to be independent, and then this younger generation coming in and bringing in industry and modernization, and how they clash with each other. So in my head, I was writing a story about what happens when the previous generation clashes with the new one, and the sort of hanging on to this wilderness of what happens to man, the creature, when he is not allowed to be his own. Like, if you have too many people living around you, you create a town. Like, I'm watching the first season of Deadwood. I finished it. And then you have Swearengen's little settlement. And now people start moving in. More people start moving in. And now they have to turn into a town. And I don't know what happens. But it's like, I imagine the older generation would be very upset about that. It's like, no, there's too many people here. I just wanted to create my own little Eden or something. So that's the direction I was going. But this project is also a great pleasure to work on. So I just like the genre. I like it's just another setting to tell stories about humans, which in my opinion have not changed for 10,000 years, who knows how much longer. Right. But we're still the same confused, stupid organisms making the same mistakes generation after generation. And besides the setting and horses and revolvers, I think we're still the same. Take Shakespeare or the Odyssey, we're still the same creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that video, and I'll link that as well, of Why Westerns Matter, because that was an inspirational video to me as well. And actually my wife, who started writing a pulp series based off of that, or kind of partially inspired after watching that video. But I think that, kind of pivoting over to the more broad Western topic, one of the things I've seen or I've heard as far as the recurring themes, like the foundational theme of Westerns, is often the conflict of old versus new. And so is, my assumption is, with the Ghost, he sort of represents something of the past with the more mysterious and the legendary aspects to him. Is that a correct assumption? And does that theme play into the novel?
I would say it's an entire yes, but it's more complicated than that.
Well, yeah, that's a bit reductive, I should say.
Well, there's a strong biblical undercurrent in this, like big time. If you read it. If you read the 11-page preview, you see that the Ghost doesn't speak except in King James Bible verses and Hellfire and Brimstone Bible verses. So what we're seeing here really is not just the dispensation of law. In fact, it's sometimes the abrogation of law. It's the dispensation of justice, and it's divine justice. This is a part of a particular sort of substrata of Western called the divine retribution Western. It's the Angel of Retribution trilogy by Eastwood and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's the old in the sense that it's the Old Testament, really, is what it is. It's kind of, we're juxtaposing not just what's happening in terms of progress. And we pin a bow on it at the end of the book. I won't spoil anything, but there's definitely a bit of a back and forth about the nature of progress and the sacrifices that some feel it's necessary to facilitate that progress. That's certainly a strong theme in the story. But undergirding it all and all of the stories really is going to be the fact that the ghost adheres to this immutable, unbreakable, completely 100% binary view of Old Testament justice. That's what it is at the end of the day. So it's kind of like the ancient world clashing with the modern world.
Not just a little bit older, but yeah.
Hammurabi's law clashing with the modern world is really what it is.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm very I'm excited to see this play out.
Without the F-bombs, honestly, without the F-bombs and the blood, this could be a Christian comic in a lot of ways, in a weird way, in terms of the story.
Well, whenever you described the sort of surrogate characters and the retinue as missionaries, I sort of had a feeling that there was, and then obviously from the scripture quoted in the preview, I was like, well, this is definitely has some religious aspects to it. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. Are there? I was going to say, one of the other things, I just kind of shift gears. One of the things I've been curious about is with the immense success of the crowdfunder so far. Initially, you guys said that you were going to be George, that you were going to be doing fulfillment. Is that still the case, or are you looking? Are you going to suddenly? Are we going to find out that there's now a George Alexopoulos Inc. publishing company? Because at this point, I don't know. I think that might be a good idea.
Well, we could always, Eric July has been doing a great job with that. We're all looking at him as a model. In this case, once the campaign's up and we've made promises, I'm not going to change anything because I don't think that's right. I don't want to trick anybody or make anyone feel like something might happen that they didn't expect. So my duties on this is I'm illustrating and I'm handling printing and fulfillment because I've done this a number of times before. I've run other campaigns on a smaller scale, but all we're going to do is scale up. So we're going to have, let's say, a few thousand books. It might be however many thousand it is. I will print the books using a reliable printer that I will personally research and hopefully pick up the books myself. I don't want them to be delivered. I will store them in a place that I choose that I know is safe, and I will ship them. And the only people I might hire to help me are people who I know and trust, like family. So in my case, it's going to be, I will handle everything myself until it's time to, like, say, we have 5,000 books on a shelf over there. And we have 5,000 packages, and hey, you guys go grab those books and put it in that package. And then I'm going to make sure everyone's, like, for instance, this is a huge thing. It's always been a huge thing. Everyone who orders the book, it's like I have their mailing address and all that stuff. And that information is so sacred to me. I will not let anyone even look at that list of people. And that's not negotiable for me. So when I say I'm going to handle fulfillment, George, am going to handle fulfillment. I'm going to slap all those labels because you need to know that you can trust me with your personal information. And if I start showing that to other people that you don't know, it's like, you trust me less, you might get upset. So it just opens a can of worms. If I had promised that or suggested that might happen and people were okay with it, no problem. So maybe another time I might do George Incorporated, something like that. But not this time.
I gotcha. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're sticking with the plan as you presented. I hope that it's not too much of a burden for you, of course. Not that, I think it's like a good
I hope
problem
it's
to
a
have.
huge burden.
You know what I
It's
mean?
so
Yeah,
successful that it's a massive, massive headache.
yeah.
I've done this before.
Huge headache.
No,
No,
the only
that's
difference
why
is,
we're doing it.
yeah, it's just a scale issue. Like I'll
Mhm.
just have to get bigger storage. That's
Yeah.
probably the only difference, and it'll take me a few more weeks to ship everything. But I'll just get some pizzas, get some tables,
Yeah.
and have my family members come and put books in envelopes. It's not that hard, and
Yeah.
I'll pay them, of course, out of my pocket.
Well, and yeah, I'm doing a little bit of, or I have fulfillment on the horizon myself, and it's like, okay, I'm getting up towards 500, and I was like, I didn't expect to hit 500, but that's starting to, that's manageable, but it's like that's going to take a little bit of time for just me to do, and the scale of this for you, but fortunately you've done this a number of times before.
Yeah, it's just scale. Like right now, I have 500 books sitting in one of my back rooms over there
Mhm.
on shelves, and they're nicely shrink wrapped and everything. So humidity is not going to damage them. But once you hit a few thousand, you have to think about storage and stuff like that,
Yeah,
depending
I
how
can
much
imagine.
space you have. But if you need help with that, I can help you out privately.
Oh, well, of course. I really appreciate that. I think
Yeah.
hopefully, this is small enough that I can manage this without without any errors. But
I would say, oh, sorry. Just make sure you print extra copies in case you have
oh,
returns or
I'm going to
lost
print about
books.
yeah, I'm going to print about 10 to 20% over what I
That's good.
expect.
Yeah. I meant to mention to you that I know someone who wanted to help you out a little bit on that front, who has done it before.
With what?
Somebody from publishing, actually. I totally forgot. I'll give you their deets afterward.
Okay.
Oh no, not you.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
okay.
Yeah, and ANVIL guy. No, 'cause
Okay.
he's really excited about the ANVIL magazine, and he was like, "Oh, dude, I really want to help them, gussy it up and make sure it's as good as possible."
Oh, well, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of one of those not to divert too much into Anvil, but I mean, that by itself, I've been blown away, and I think that if a little guy like myself with a couple of very generous shout outs here and there has been able to be as successful as it has, that I do think that there is a like you were talking about, the market has a desire for like authentic and just direct to consumer media that doesn't hate them. You know what I mean? It's such a crazy proposition, and so I think that that's a little indicator, and I think you guys are a huge indicator, and I think that now with Ripaverse last year and you guys coming in up this year, I think that more and more people are going to be taking notice and looking and saying, "Oh wow, there are alternatives,"
Yeah.
So hopefully, I think I mentioned it during our previous interview, but I'm hoping that there's like a whole set of vendors that everybody that all of us can feel good about working with, and it's like we're not having to go to somebody that we don't know and don't trust and hand them information like George was saying that is extremely important and have any kind of concerns about that, because I think it's important to be that's part of the responsibility, because as it is right now, we are the product for Twitter and all these other services and YouTube and everything else. We're the product, so we're getting sold. All of our data is getting sold. So I think it's important to be responsible with the data that is entrusted to us.
All us creators have the same bottlenecks though, so we can help each other out with, like, I had a
Exactly.
couple of people reach out like, oh, if you need a printer, use this printer or something. But all of our common bottlenecks are things like printing, distribution, which site to use, like Indiegogo, or I use Etsy, for example, when somebody just wants to buy one of my books and I don't
Mhm.
do a campaign for it. I've had some problems with Etsy, but they still keep me on, for example. Um, but there's just little things that any creator can handle. Um, yeah, printing, distribution, shipping. And other than that, it's just networking and having and building a good reputation as, say, a creator who is prompt with fulfillment, or if there's ever a customer problem, they should know that, for instance, we're going to handle their personal information like the Bibles. It's so sacred, and we're never going to misuse their personal information or share it. There, that's
or sell it. Yeah,
yeah, that's for
like
me.
everybody does.
No,
In the mainstream.
0% chance with that. Even if it might be profitable to share, like, oh,
Mhm.
email addresses.
Oh yeah.
Can I have the email address of your customers? It's like, absolutely not. My customers never consented to that. I never asked them.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of thing I would publicly say, because I want my customers to know they can trust me. Even customers that used to be customers and like don't like me anymore, let's say, they are 1,000% safe. Like,
Mhm.
I'll never, even if I'm mad at them, like, I'll never,
Dox
misuse.
anybody. Yeah, yeah.
No, 0% chance.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that's the backbone of creator. Um, Whatever it is we're building here, you can call it any name you want.
Mhm.
IronAge, whatever. If customers and creators can trust each other, then all the other stuff, all the other mistakes, like if I'm late on the book, which I won't be, they'll understand, and I'm still going to deliver a good book. And they need to. It's just mutual trust. That's all.
People don't even understand this dude is a machine. Like, he's a freaking, he has, I mean, technically it's a 105-page book or whatever, right? You've already got like 13 pages.
But it was planned to be 50 pages.
Yeah, right.
But
what I'm saying is that's like a tenth of the book, or around there, right? So
once,
you're rocking pretty hard there. Dude, when I draw comics, it's like a panel a day. Okay, it's not even a page a day.
As long as the customers know that's no problem. Like, I can promise, at least, like, once I do my research, then I'll be able to hammer out
Mhm.
pages really fast. Like, right now I'm taking a break to do, promotion and stuff, and then I'll do my trip, and then I'll hammer out the rest of the book, hopefully in a couple months, maybe 3 months. And then actually the part that's going to take the longest is proofreading, making sure the colors are right, making
Mhm.
sure there's no printing errors and stuff like that.
Do you like to do, we haven't really talked about that. Do you like to do revisions of pages after the whole thing is finalized? Maybe I'll redraw this page, maybe I'll redraw that page.
I call them splinters. So if I'm reading and I'm touching all the surfaces and my hand gets caught on a panel, like if my eye gets caught and says, wait, this panel, for some reason, my eye is getting stuck here, I might smooth that page out. Or that color standing out for some reason, I'm going to fix that. Or there's a typo. Even on my Gooseberry Pies, I don't know if you guys know, I did a children's book
Mhm.
where, after how many revisions? 7 revisions. We printed like 500 copies, and then I found a typo. And I'm like, son of a gun. So there's still going to be little typos like that. I'm just embarrassed. It's not a huge deal, but I don't want people to think that I'm being careless. So I will go through, and I'm sure when it's time to do the bulk printing, Razor, I'm going to send you the books, and I need you to comb through them for typos or anything. And color corrections. There's a million different things. That takes forever for me. But then you print and you never think about it again, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I have a Gooseberry Pie. If I'd been thinking, I would have grabbed it from upstairs where my
That's
daughter's
right.
room is. But yeah,
And you would have had Deathmask there behind
well,
you.
yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna say I actually
you do have it
I was gonna say I interviewed you, and I didn't know where the Long Moonlight signed copy was, and then it was like the day afterwards I found it in a box, and I was like, of course I found it, but yeah, I was gonna say we'll show a little bit of the amazing black and white illustrations here,
This is not that dissimilar stylistically.
Oh,
No.
well, I think it's kind of well, to me, as somebody who is not very skilled with pen and ink or anything like that, your ability to capture motion has always really been something that I've been very impressed by, and it's something that I think is lacking from so many comics. Is there a, like, I don't know, is that something that you had to work on, or have you just always kind of naturally had very fluid, very dynamic drawing style?
Well, I can't take any credit for that sort of thing. I just read a lot of manga, for instance,
Hmm.
and there's something I noticed a huge difference between Western and Eastern composition and like poses, for example. Like I go to my, I think it's my Amazon app, my Amazon Video every now and then, and I see an ad for The Mandalorian. And I see this pose. It's very static, where he's holding Baby Yoda or whatever and shooting a gun, and it's a side pose.
Hmm.
And every time I look at that, I'm thinking like that person who did that needs to be fired because there's no depth to that image at all. There's no Z axis, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
You have this up and down, left and right. But I'm going to, for instance, I'm going to go like this with my hand. That's
Hmm.
depth.
Yeah.
That says you're going into the page. I don't see a lot of comics nowadays in the West, especially using the Z axis depth. So when I use like speed lines, it can be perceived as a stereotypical, like, oh, I'm doing an action, I'm powering up, and speed lines everywhere. Wow. But actually, speed lines are a way of tricking the eye into pulling them. I
Hmm.
think of it as energy flying across the screen. So if if a horse is turning and then going towards the camera, I'm going to show speed lines going like this because it tricks you into seeing the motion in one panel, but actually it's like a split second. It would be the same as a motion blur. There's a
Hmm.
gun that's about to shoot a guy in the head. It's happening so fast that you're going to only see speed lines of the gun. So that's something manga does very well. I don't see that happening a lot in the West. So, as much as I would love to accept credit for that sort of thing, I really am just a student of manga, and I'm borrowing their techniques.
Interesting. Very cool. Yeah, and I've just noticed that it's something that it's apparent in Gooseberry Pie or Mary Sue or
When he's
any of
falling
your
off a
or any of your many of your political cartoons, and obviously in this as well. So um, that's something that I always think is a strong point whenever you can convey action, because a visual medium lends itself to more interesting and dynamic shots, and I sometimes think that some comics don't take advantage, like there's too much talking, or you know what I mean. They're not really utilizing the action whenever they get it.
yeah. One of there's an inside joke with manga creators of the way that a Western creator might do a Superman panel. There'll be a narration box saying, "As Superman jumped through the window, dot dot dot," and then Superman in the same panel jumps through the window, and then he says, "I'm jumping through the window." So there's this redundant.
Yeah.
Whereas I would even take out all text if I could, and even like when a guy shoots a gun, you would hear, blam blam or something. I would even try to take that out because I want just the speed lines and the dirt, and I would like spray ink all over the place just to say you can hear the blam even though you don't see
Hmm.
the words. That's a manga thing. um, but that reminds me of what's his name? He did Making Comics and Understanding Comics. Scott McCloud. Did you ever read those books?
I have not. No.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think anyone who even touches a comic book needs to read those, especially Making Comics. He talks about all the different, like, you could take one, like just one guy shooting a gun and then a guy getting hit. And manga might even take 2 3 pages and dozens of panels to show not just the guy getting shot, but everyone in the background going,
Yeah.
and then maybe a bullet casing in the air or something.
Hmm.
And they would really milk that one action because it's so dramatic.
Hmm.
And you're
Yeah, it's kind of
supposed.
like the famous Steve Ditko sequence in Spider-Man where he's under the heavy machinery. You remember that
He's
thing?
trying to hold it up, right?
The classic one where he's just for pages and pages,
Yeah.
all he's trying to do is get the machinery off of him. And when he finally does it, it's like freaking splooge everywhere. You know what I mean? Like he milks. Steve Ditko was a genius,
Yeah.
but it's just one of those things, right? The payoff. He does that really really well. You know what I mean? Like because I'm a big believer in comic scripts should just be as truncated as possible, because this is an artistic medium. The artist needs to take it and run with it, right? So we mentioned on Friday Night Tights, he took, like, I don't know, a 50 to 60 page, something like that, script, and turned it into over 100 pages, because we just expanded. His phrase was let it breathe. You know what I mean? That's I love working like that. You know what I mean?
We had to do it.
That's how it should have been. That's always how a comic should be done.
Because your script is written so richly with a lot of detail, and I don't want any of that detail to be lost. Like, oh, I as an artist have to somehow pack all these actions into one panel. Like, a guy walks into a saloon, let's say, and we're supposed to look at all the guys looking at him in the saloon, and they're all giving each other dirty looks. I could have done that in one panel, but that's not the same as feeling like Sergio Leone would have done this, where a bunch of guys for like 10 minutes are just staring at each other. Maybe that's too much, but in our case, I wanted to really establish what the script says. Everyone's giving each other dirty looks, but they're doing it very carefully. And so that might have taken 2 pages, even though it was 1 paragraph in the script. So that I've always felt the script needs to decide how long the comic is, not say an arbitrary budget. If we were working for Marvel, they'll say this story has to be 28 pages. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It can be as many pages as the people decide they want to afford.
Mm-hmm.
So our books are going to cost X, and as long as we can afford to release it, then, and keep a little bit for ourselves, which we can. I think the book should be as long as we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the East versus the East-West thing. This is manga, and this is the Bondis in A format. It's the same idea. It's just, okay, stories as long as it needs to be. We'll make it nice. We'll make it as pretty as possible. We'll give you a lot of value for the physical object, lots of stuff in it, lots of extras, and you're going to be glad that you got the physical object. And of course, we're going to have the digital too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't want to keep you guys for too much longer, but with the campaign going so well, so early, and I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't even caught up to the fact that it's out there and that it's, breaking the sound barrier in terms of funding. What do you see going forward just with this campaign? Are you guys have any big plans in mind? Are you going to be doing any crazy guerrilla marketing tactics, or some armed horsemen going to ride into CNN or anything like that?
No, I mean, we're going to do promotion and talk to people and whatnot. I've talked to a couple of interesting kind of like Old West podcasts and stuff like that to, give them an opportunity to talk about Canyon Diablo, which is a cool story anyways, even without our story being attached to it. So, some interesting stuff like that. But as far as the campaign goes, I mean, this guy's a lot more experienced at doing it. Deathmask and The Long Moonlight, the Night Vale series, were both released through a traditional publisher who we may work with in keeping the book in print, by the way, like after all of this is over, just so that it never leaves the market, right? My previous publisher does comics and does them really well, actually. Chuck Dixon works for them, actually. Some other big names. But like, I'm not sure about, like, as far as conducting campaigns. Like, he's more so the person to ask on that. Wherever he needs me to promote, I will.
I mean, right now we're in the phase, and my knowledge is limited too, but we're in the phase where we just need people whoever wants the book should know that it exists, and then they can decide if they want it or not. And then there's the next level of people who know the book exists but aren't sure if they want it yet. So then our job becomes persuading them. So that means showing them more panels, enticing them, making them aware of what the project is. So it's like, I want the book, but I don't know what's in it. So we'll show them a little more.
Yeah. And
then there's the people who don't want the book that maybe we can persuade if we just keep showing them that this is a real thing and this is something you want. But after, like, let's say it got funded really fast and that was a pleasant surprise. But as far as production goes, I would have worked the same if we sold just the bare minimum. As you know, if we get 10 times our budget, it's going to be the same book no matter what. I would have worked just as hard either way. As far as like, let's say when the campaign ends, we're going to do something. We can do something where it's called in demand on Indiegogo, where the campaign will remain open. You can still order it until the point where, say, I start shipping. Then I'm going to officially close it. That's what I think we should do. But it's ultimately Razör's project, so he can decide. But once the campaign's closed, as far as I'm concerned, you know, my job is done, and then we'll talk about the future whenever he wants to. But this is the time right now, the next 30 days, to tell everyone, if you want a first edition of this book, which will never be available again, this is the only time you can get it. So that's our job for now.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, you know, I've already backed, but I've learned a lot more about it during this interview, and I'm very excited. I really appreciate you guys joining us today to share about this project. I'm super excited about it. And I'll have everything linked in the description for anybody who wants to check it out if you haven't heard about it. And thank you guys very much.
My pleasure, Richard. Or IronAge.
Can you give us a good yeehaw here? Can you give us?
Oh, okay. I'm being put on the spot. I haven't been to a.
I don't want to hear no half-hearted yeehaws, motherfucker.
Okay, all right. Now the pressure is rising. My God, Razör.
Visualize the Crown Vic going over the ravine.
Oh man, I haven't been to a Pokes game in a long time. I'm technically an OSU Cowboy, so this should be well within my wheelhouse. But
here.
Yeah, exactly. Not quite from Muskogee, but you know, I'll give you guys a farewell yeehaw and call it good.
That's fine. And I'll give you an oppa.
Oh, all right, that works.
Greek oppa.
And you got to at least give us all a God fucking speed for that one. Then.
God fucking speed. Thank you for watching.